One of the things that has the power to paralyze us in life is fear. We're all aware of it, we're all familiar with it, but sometimes fear takes such a strong hold on our lives, on our minds, on our ability to actually live the life that we want to live, that we sometimes forget its presence. We sometimes ignore or discount its impact. Fear, in perhaps no better words, can be described as a prison created by our mind. But you see, the thing about fear is that it's not real to begin with. It's just an expectation, it's just a thought. If you look at all the things that you were afraid of and you trace back those events and see how much of that fear actually manifested or actually transpired in the way that you thought it would, you'll see that in reality, very few of the things that you actually fear turn out to come true. And that's why fear has a wonderful acronym, FEAR, or false expectations appearing real. That's what fear really stands for. Because these are just expectations. They're not true reality. They're not grounded in peace, in calm, in trust, and in joy. Instead, they're fed by anxiety, fed by depression, fed by a state of worry and sort of angst and tension. And can be so debilitating sometimes, right? Think about how much fear has prevented you from really expressing your true self, from living the life that you want to live. I can point to my own example how numerous instances have kind of paralyzed me from taking action. Whether that was wanting to join the Peace Corps right after college. I thought that was such a wonderful idea to actually do service and give back to a community and really, do something that I felt gave me a sense of purpose. But of course, during my younger years, the thought of being away from family, being away from my loved ones, being in a faraway country for 2 years really frightened me. And so in that particular instance, fear got the best of me. And of course, there's many other examples throughout life of how fear showed up at my door, really made me kind of freeze in my tracks like a deer in headlights. And unfortunately, in many cases, I simply turned back. I never actually pushed the limits. I never actually moved fear to the side to walk on forward. But if there's one thing that I've learned on this spiritual journey, on this path toward rediscovering my true essence, rediscovering my true self, I've learned that fear is perhaps the worst emotion, the worst quality, the worst state of mind that we can ever have. When we think of opposites, right, we think of, many of us think in terms of dualities. And I always say it often that dualities are not the end all be all, right? The true purpose of spirituality is to transcend all duality and to see everything as one. But when we think of duality, right, and when we think of what is the opposite of love, and I use love here because love is the epitome of all feelings. It is the epitome of all emotions, of all states of being. In fact, if you tear down all the layers that we believe make up who we are, all that we are left with is love, is consciousness, is source. So when we think about what is the opposite of that, right? What is the antithesis of love? Many of us would probably be quick to point to hate. And, we like to think that hate is the opposite of love. Hate and oppression and bigotry and injustice and indignation and all of these other sort of brothers and sisters of hate. But in actuality, the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is fear. Think about this for a moment. Every single form of hate that exists in the world today, whether directed towards others or whether directed toward ourselves, ultimately comes from a deep feeling of fear, a feeling of insecurity, a feeling that we are not enough and that we are not loved. And so our ego, the unconscious mind, the unaware mind, tells us that this hate is justified, tells us that this discrimination or this insecurity is somehow true. But if we can just go to the source of our hatred, if we can just go down to the source of why we feel the way that we do, we realize that it's not hate that is preventing us from being our best version of ourselves. It's rather that fear that has existed in us as children, that fear that has been living rent-free in our mind for so many years and has so many different corners where there are shadows, where there are blind spots, and we don't actually notice it, but it's actually growing each and every day. It's festering like a virus, like a disease. And that's why it's so important to be aware of fear of all forms, right? One thing that I used to be afraid of a lot was, just the nighttime and the dark and not being able to see. And of course, that is a subset of a deeper fear, which was, a fear of the unknown, a fear that many of us share, right? We are afraid of what may come. And of course, our mind typically likes to focus on the negatives, likes to focus on, for example, I was just watching right now. It was actually a very tragic event that transpired, but I was reading the news and I heard about this plane crash that occurred, seemingly could have been avoided. And immediately my mind, after, praying for and sympathizing with the victims of that crash, immediately my mind raced to thoughts of, well, you have a flight coming up next month. And oh gosh, what's going to happen then? Plane crashes happen. And, while we're on the topic of plane crashes, that's a fear that's always kind of come up. And even though if we think about it, more people are involved in car crashes, unfortunately, than they are in plane crashes. But sometimes, whatever that fear may be, it can linger. It can, as I said, fester and take a life form of its own. And it can sometimes stop us from actually doing what we need to do. The true spiritual person, the true sage, the true mystic, the true lover of God is never afraid. And even if they are afraid in that moment, they acknowledge their fear, they honor it, but they ultimately move past it. They realize that there is a force greater than their fear, which of course is love. And even if that love is not fully felt in that moment, even if that love is not fully realized or embodied, at least there is an understanding, there is a perception that if I put my trust into the creator of love, into the source of all love, which is God himself, God Almighty, then there is nothing that I should ever fear in my life. Because it's true, we don't know what's going to happen, right? That's part of the mystery and the adventure of life, not knowing what's going to happen next. But there's two ways to kind of look at it, right? We can either be paralyzed by our fear, we can either be living in a prison of our own creation, or we can look forward with a sense of hope, with a sense of trust, with a sense of wanting to take a chance, wanting to take a risk, knowing that we can go forth and that whatever is meant to be, whatever is meant to come our way will come our way. And that's why I always tell people that, growth happens outside of your comfort zone. Because the minute you step into something you're uncomfortable with, that kind of tests you, that pushes you, you're breaking through your fear. You're breaking through sort of that glass ceiling, and you're actually able to truly be free. So overcoming fear is not avoiding fear. It's not ignoring it. It's not doing something else. Overcoming fear is really spending the time to try to analyze it, to try to get to the root of it. And ultimately, it's not just about analyzing. It's not just about introspection, but to actually go through with it, to actually take that step, to actually manifest that intention, that confidence, that love, and that trust into a form of action. Taking the internal and bringing it out into the external. So fear is this wonderful instrument. It's kind of similar to the ego. And of course, fear originates from the ego. It originates from a mind that has not been fully aware or fully awakened. But of course, just like the ego, fear is ultimately a teacher. Fear is ultimately there to test us, to train us, and to ultimately get the best out of us. Maybe today, if I'm presented with a challenge and I don't have the circumstances that I'm in, maybe I would consider joining the Peace Corps and taking on that challenge and doing something different and just putting my full faith and trust in God, whatever may come. And I've learned so many times in my life, anything that I've ever been afraid of, especially in recent years, where I feel like my connection and my communion with God has only gotten stronger. I feel like even if there is fear in the background, and I'm not saying that I don't have fear, but even if there is fear in the background, I'm able to recognize it. And I'm able to kind of arrest its momentum or arrest its influence, arrest kind of its ability to control my life. Because I've just seen, so many instances where fear got the best of me and prevented me from really growing as a person, really learning as a person. And I see it in a lot of others as well, too. I see it every single day. In fact, more than any other form of expression, more than any form of emotion or quality or state of being, I see fear a lot. Because I think there's just something about us that craves security, that craves comfort, that craves sort of staying on the island rather than, taking a boat and swimming out into the great unknown. So it's so important to be aware of that. Because maybe there is a fear right now that is kind of swimming beneath the surface that you've either ignored or you've let to kind of be dormant, but it's not really dormant, right? It's fully there. So I hope you guys got a sense of just how debilitating fear can be. But to turn, a negative into a positive, that you have a choice to overcome your fear. It's not that you are bound by your fear. It's not that you are limited by it. Rather, the fear is there as the ultimate test to see if you can truly overcome it. Remember, nothing is put into our life for no reason. I talked on the last video about, the beauty of sickness, the beauty of illness, and how even though some of our illnesses can be so devastating, can be so heart-wrenching, can be so difficult and challenging, they're ultimately there by design. They ultimately serve a purpose. And if we can see and recognize this purpose, well, then we can grow with our sickness. We can grow and heal with our sickness. And the same is true with fear. If we can recognize our fear, if we can take the time to truly want to make that change, right? Because you have to have that desire. It's not like you can just sort of wish it away. You have to kind of roll back the years in a sense. And maybe if you just kind of covered it all this time, put a bandage on it, pretended it didn't exist, well, now you're going to have to unpeel everything. Now you're going to have to, unravel all of the different layers to get to the source, to get to the root of why you are afraid. Where does that fear ultimately come from? Truly, if all of us had that introspection or that desire to go deeper into ourselves, we'll be able to shatter all the, bonds of our fear. So this is why I feel so strongly about this topic, because I feel like we are wasting our potential. We are wasting our love. We are living a life that's so, limited sometimes, that's so incomplete. And unfortunately, many of us go many years without actually realizing it. Some of us actually never truly solve it. We never really do get a glimpse of that eternal happiness, that eternal joy and inner peace that comes from not fearing anything, that comes from simply loving the beloved, loving God, and just allowing that trust to help us navigate our fears, to help us navigate the unknown. Because if you think about it, this is all just a game, right? This life, this existence, this coming and going, this is all just one big, beautiful dance. And every day that we wake up, we grow an attachment to this life. We develop a routine, we develop relationships, we strengthen those relationships, we progress, right? We achieve our goals, we move toward our goals. And so every day there's a greater and greater attachment to this world. But the true test is to recognize that this is not the end all be all. And I think the more detached that we become, the more that we remember our ultimate purpose and our ultimate destination and the ultimate journey, the less we will have to fear. Because when God is at the center of all your decisions, of all your thoughts, there simply is no room for fear anymore. God is the only form of truth. There is no room for false expectations. There's only room for true reality, which is God. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it shed some light into fear and how it really plays a role in our life. But more importantly, how we can overcome it, how we can truly break past it. It requires a lot of work. I'm not sugarcoating it or making little of it. It does require a lot of work. Some of my fears that I've had for many, many years, it took some time to really understand it and unravel it. And, it's a lot of shadow work. It's a lot of internal work. But that is what has gotten me to where I am today. Feeling at ease, feeling not overwhelmed by all my fear. Again, it's not that I've eliminated all fear, but certainly the big ones I have, and if there's others that still linger, their effect has been greatly diminished. And for that, I'm so much at peace and so happy and so thankful that God has given me this opportunity to share this with others and hopefully help others who may be on a similar path, who may have struggled with so many different fears growing up, hopefully to, get that light bulb to turn on and maybe some things to start clicking together for us to ultimately awaken and discover our true selves. So if you like this video, please drop a like. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And, feel free to share, something that, either you're afraid of or something that you're working on. If you feel comfortable, I'll try my best to really, provide a response that can maybe help with that. Or if you feel comfortable, you can certainly reach out to me, privately as well. But you'd be surprised, sometimes a fear that you think is just specific to you in actuality, many of us might have that fear as well. So it could be of benefit to the community. But with that, I really want to thank you all again for taking some time out of your busy day, out of your busy lives. I'm sure you all have so much to do and so many responsibilities. But the fact that you're even still listening to this video shows me that, and shows yourself, hopefully, that you really are interested and committed to your spiritual growth. And with that, if you want more videos that can help, I definitely encourage you to check out the channel. As I always mention, new videos. I try to produce those every single week. Sometimes it's a little bit harder than others, but I do my best, and God willing, they come out when they need to come out. But I really want to appreciate you for this. I just want to give you one final message of encouragement and hope, and that's, there's nothing to fear, right? Some people might say, the only thing to fear is God Himself. But if you really think about it, even that, if you can give yourself a permission to fear one being, of course, it's God. But even transcending that, when you enter a state of deep, unconditional, unparalleled love, you'll realize that there's only room in this world for love and love alone. And that fear is just an invention of our minds, and that the true purpose of awakening is to shatter that fear and to embrace our love, embrace our true selves. So thank you all again. I wish you a wonderful day and life ahead, full of love, free from fear, and you'll be amazed what the journey has in store for you at that point.